Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel. It is that time for some meta predictions for the Charlotte Regional Championship. Charlotte is going to be the largest tournament of all time, and I'm excited to see what goes down. Unfortunately, I was unable to go, but I will be in Knoxville. And of course, heading into Knoxville, we got to see what the meta is going to be like in Charlotte, which might help dictate what will be good over in Knoxville. But yeah, Charlotte is going to be the biggest regional ever. We're coming off of a huge tournament in Portland where Giratina V-Star really won a regional. So we're definitely in a very interesting spot right now in our format. Giratina stonks are up. Charizard stonks are a little bit down, but we are going to be looking at all my meta predictions for Charlotte regionals, what I think will do well, and what I'm predicting is going to be good for the tournament. I didn't do any like top 5 or tier list videos this time around, but I think I'll have one for Knoxville. But yeah, let's get into it. If y'all are new here to the second channel, make sure to subscribe down below and leave a like on the video if you want to enjoy. So, Giratina, like I said, it is the best deck in the format right now, or at the very least, it should be the best deck. It just won Portland. It beat Jake Gearhart in that money match, which I do think does have a bit of an impact on people's opinions on both Guardy and Tina. But I do think that Tina is the deck to beat right now, or should be the deck to beat. It's most likely going to be the most popular deck in Charlotte, coming off of a huge regional win. Giratina is also not like super hard to play. It's pretty straightforward, has a good Charizard matchup, and to be honest, Tina doesn't really have any super bad matchups. I think Tina's matchups are all pretty good, to be honest with you. So I definitely think that Tina is going to be the deck to beat. Can it win back-to-back regionals, though? Probably not. I don't think that it will win back-to-back regionals, but wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Giratina or two in the top 8. Charizard is still a very strong deck right now. While I do think that Charizard is getting bullied out of the format a little bit by Giratina and all these other decks, I think Charizard is still a fine deck nonetheless. It does have a lot of counters right now, and I think a lot of people are really, hating on the Zard right now, especially with how popular Giratina is. It could be pretty sketchy unless somebody can come up with an insane counter to Giratina. Charizard definitely looks to be in a bit of a weaker spot right now, but it's still a pretty fine deck. I think it's still one of the top decks in the format, and pretty good chance we might see a Charizard in top 8 still. It's still Charizard. It'll still probably be a heavily played deck, and wouldn't be surprised if there was another one in top 8, at least a couple in top 16. Gardevoir is definitely the, I don't even want to call it the sleeper of the format, but it feels like Guardy just isn't really getting the respect everyone, thinks it should be getting right now. It did, lose in that money match to Giratina, though I think a lot of people might admit and agree that Gardevoir actually beats Giratina most of the time. I think Gardevoir is actually in a good spot right now. I mean, outside of having a bit of a shaky Miraidon matchup, I think Guardy's still pretty well positioned in the format. I think that, a good Guardy player, if they test and know how to play the Giratina matchup, I think the Giratina matchup's good. If you're playing more workers now in Gardevoir 2 alongside the stadiums and the vacuum, I think your matchup going into Tina is just even better. Yeah, I think Gardevoir is in a great spot still. I think Guardy is still a good deck. I think the list here that Bodhi played is going to be a pretty good list going forward. The Avery, it doesn't seem to be as good in Guardy right now, though I will say Guardy does have to watch out for any Giratina decks playing Avery. I think if Giratina is going to be popular this weekend, there is a chance that they might be playing a one of Avery in the deck, and I think Avery could be a pretty big deal if you're expecting more Guardy. But I wouldn't be surprised if Guardy was a little bit more popular this weekend. Definitely feels like it is going to be a bit of a big play this weekend. I think some big players will be on the deck, so definitely keep your eye on Gardevoir this weekend. It's a pretty good deck. I think that it's got good matchups, and it can beat Tina. I think it can beat Charizard. And yeah, outside of just that like awkward Miraidon matchup, it's pretty good. Honestly, wouldn't be surprised if there's another Guardy in top 8 at Charlotte. Miraidon is definitely in a bit of an interesting spot. It still seems like a pretty solid deck. It's still one of the most straightforward, strong decks in the meta that doesn't really need to have any super bad matchups to do well, because it's Miraidon. Getting tournament attacks are really good. I think the Nick Moffat build here from Portland is actually the best build of the deck right now. I'm a huge fan of the versatility of Iono and Judge. The Peony build is strong, don't get me wrong, and I think the Peony build has a lot of merit. But personally, if I were to play Miraidon this weekend, I would 100% play the Nick Moffat build. I don't know if I would play the exact 60, but I don't really know how you would change the 60. The only thing that's debatable is the Tapu Koko EX, because Charizard is starting to play Switch now, which is a really big counter to Tapu Koko. Sometimes you have to go Judge, Iono, Path, Koko Paralyze, and hope they don't hit a Switch / Arvin combo off of the Iono Judge combo, but I do think that the Miraidon build here that Nick Moffat had is pretty good, and I think it's still a very strong build going into Charlotte. I think Miraidon's got a fine Tina matchup. I think that the Beach Courts are just really good, too, to counter Path the Peak, which obviously is a card Tina plays. Miraidon does seem like a decent play, and again, if I were to play it, I would probably play Nick Moffat's build. Peony Miraidon isn't terrible either, though, don't get me wrong. I don't think that Peony Miraidon is a terrible deck. This is the highest placing Peony Miraidon list from Portland, and I think the deck is still fine. It does obviously have a bit more of a linear strategy, doesn't have the Ionos, doesn't have the Judge, doesn't have the Path for Disruption. You do see the Coco here in this list, but again, that might just been because of how people weren't going to be playing Switch and Charizard this weekend, but I do think that Peony Miraidon is still a fine play. I don't think it's as good as the Judge Iono Path build, but I think Peony Miraidon is still fine. Miraidon always finds his way into top 8. I don't know if we're going to see the Peony Miraidon or the Judge Path Miraidon top 8. You know what? Miraidon definitely has a good chance of getting top 8 this weekend at Charlotte. It's just a deck that always manages to squeak under there and get a random top 8 placement, but definitely doesn't seem like a terrible deck, right? Now, Mew VMAX is the dark horse of the format. I think Mew, surprisingly enough, seems to be in a very good spot right now. I thought, honestly, going into Portland, because I played Mew in San Antonio, I didn't think Mew was a good play at all for Portland. I'm like, all right, Charizard just won San Antonio. I don't know if I'd play Mew again. I think Mew is a little too volatile right now. But it feels like Mew does have a chance of beating Charizard. I think a lot of people have figured out the methods of beating it thanks to Judge Path, the Box of Disaster, not giving your opponent the easy 3-prize Mew knockout against Charizard, being able to set up KOs with Power Tablet after the box. I think that Mew has actually figured out its method of beating Charizard. I do think that Mew is actually just in a fantastic spot right now in our format. It also is one of the only decks that I think actually boasts for a fair Tina matchup. I think with how popular Tina will be this weekend, I think that Mew's actually not a bad play because I do think that Mew has a pretty decent Giratina matchup. Yeah, it's one of the decks that I think a lot of Tina players will admit that, like, yeah, I'm scared of Mew. Mew is a bad matchup for Giratina, and I think that might continue. Now, will Spiritomb see an uptick in play this weekend? I think that's going to be the main question. Will we see more Spiritomb this weekend? I don't know. Like, if I'm playing Giratina, I don't know if I'm putting a Tomb in the deck. Giratina doesn't really have space for Spiritomb. It doesn't really have room for it. I don't know if it's worth playing a Tomb in Tina. I also don't know if Tina is worth playing apart from anything other than, like, Arc and Miraidon. But I do think that Mew will still be popular. We are seeing it come off of 2 top 8 finishes this weekend. We see Ian Rob's list here with the double Fusion Energy Sparkle just to counter the Spiritomb and then leaning into the DTEs. And then, of course, we do have Maddox's build here with the Fusion build with the Meloetta and the Ice Cube, which I do like a lot. I think both builds of Mew are both really strong. Both have their ups and downs. Both are pretty strong and have their, like I said, they have their strengths and their weaknesses. If I were to be playing Mew this weekend, I don't know if I would play Fusion. Fusion doesn't seem terrible. I do like the more straightforward build of the DTE. The Fusion build might be a bit better into Tina over the DT build, or maybe it's the other way around. I'm not too sure. Mew's not bad, though. I think that people are figuring out that Mew can actually beat Charizard now, thanks to Double Box of Disaster. And yeah, Mew's not a bad deck. And I mean, honestly, with Charizard being on the downswing right now, and with less Charizard potentially being played due to Tina's popularity, it might be a good time to play Mew again, in all honesty. Yeah, I think Mew's a good deck. And honestly, I keep saying this for all these decks, but Mew's another deck that wouldn't surprise me if we saw one in top 8. Rapid Strike's another deck right now that seems to be kind of on the cusp of being like a super good deck. It's actually a great deck in all honesty. Like, it's got good matchups. I think it's matchups against Miraidon, Zard, and even your Tina matchup is pretty good too. I think a lot of Rapid Strike players will say that Rapid Strike beats Tina, and I do think that is the case. Rapid Strike didn't have as good of a run this time around in Portland than it did in San Antonio. There was one in top 16, nonetheless, and the deck is still really good. Like, I think it's a pretty safe deck. If you're somebody who's been playing Rapid Strike for this entire format and doesn't really know what to play for Charlotte, honestly, just play Rapid Strike. I think Rapid Strike's still a good deck. It doesn't really get any worse with the results of Portland, because if Giratina is going to be more popular, it's not a bad time to play Rapid Strike then. All right, Snorlax. Now, Snorlax definitely feels like it's on the downswing right now, and that's mainly because of how good Giratina is. Giratina did just win the Portland Regional Championships, and that's a very big deal for Snorlax, because Snorlax has it should, in theory, have a really bad Giratina matchup. Now, unless you're like Cal Connor, who can still somehow beat Giratina, I don't know if Snorlax Stall is the best play for Charlotte. With Giratina being really popular, it is a bit of a sketchier play. Though I will say you can still beat up on the decks that aren't prepared for Snorlax if Gardevoir is specifically starting to cut the Professor Turo out of the deck, which some of the lists are doing. I think that is a very big deal for Snorlax. I think Snorlax is honestly still in a decent spot outside of a bad Tina matchup. If you can dodge Tina, you can still have a good run. I don't know if we'll see a Snorlax in top 8 this time. There might just be too much Tina for it to get top 8, but Snorlax could still get a top 16 run. And I wanted to talk about the Pidgeot build. The Pidgeot build is still good. I mean, we did see Hale do pretty good in Portland with an updated version of the Pidgeot Snorlax deck. And I think that Pidgeot Snorlax is still worth trying out. Maybe it's a bit weaker now, I guess, with like Tina's popularity. But I mean, if you're going to play Snorlax, no matter what build, you're just going to have to accept the fact that your Tina matchup just isn't great. But I guess the Pidgeot build might be weaker in a field of more Miraidon. So I don't know. Now, Lostbox is an interesting deck right now. It also feels like Lostbox is like on the cusp of being something good. I think it does have a lot of glaring weaknesses, but Lostbox does seem to still be a fine play. I think that the way that is going to be the most popular is going to be the super effective glasses build of Lostbox, mainly because it seems to be the one that gets the most consistent results out of all of the Lost Zone pile decks. It seems to be the one that gets the best results, and the glasses build still seems good. I don't know if the glasses deck has a great Tina matchup, though. I know you do have a Roaring Moon and Mew EX, so theoretically you should be okay because you have two different attackers that can hit for weakness in that matchup, which is a pretty big deal. Or not hit for weakness, but knock out Giratina in one hit, which is a big deal. Having both Mew and Moon is pretty good. Just not having the Sableye, though, could be a big deal. But overall, I think Glasses Lostbox is still a pretty decent deck, and still, honestly, yeah, seems like a good play still for Charlotte. Doesn't seem like a bad deck at all. I don't know if you'd really change any of the attackers around. All the attackers seem to be pretty correct. The Mew and the Moon are pretty good right now against Tina. Having the Minior is obviously still going to be very good. The Tropius still worth playing because Charizard, it'll still be played, even if it's on the downswing. I think Sablezard's still a very underrated deck. I think Sablezard also has a great Giratina matchup, mainly because it's a very aggressive version of Lostbox that can get to 10 really quickly, a lot of the time before Giratina. And then, of course, you have the Radiant Charizard, which can be a very big deal for the Giratina deck. You do play Manaphy Jirachi, which can be good, too, against Giratina. Overall, I think that Sablezard is a pretty fine deck right now, and I think definitely has its potential still in the format. I think it's a very slept-on deck. It won a Regionals, but nobody's talking about it. Why is that? Well, I don't know, but I do think that the deck is good. I know that the Roaring Moon Charizard deck is also still seeing some play. That's not a bad play either. Honestly, that build might also be decent against Giratina. I haven't really tested that matchup too much, but Roaring Moon Sablezard might also be a decent play too. But I really want to see Sablezard do well. It did get top 16 in Portland, so it could run it back. It's definitely an underrated deck. The Kyogre build also seems okay right now. The Kyogre build might have a bit of a shakier time against Giratina potentially, but overall it seems like it's still like a fine play with Miraidon being popular right now, having the Kyogre, even Roaring Moon's on the rise right now. Like, we'll get to that later, but yeah, with Roaring Moon even starting to get a little bit of play right now, Kyogre doesn't seem like a bad deck. This is the highest placing Kyogre build in Portland. It's a very interesting list here that I had seen with the Mimikyu and the Kyogre, the Ditto, the Raikou, the Devolution, a lot going on, but Kyogre doesn't seem like a bad play right now in our format. It definitely seems like Kyogre is in an okay spot right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw one, have a deep run in a tournament. Maybe not get top 8, but still have like a deep run regardless. Now, Arc Piles. Arc Piles seem to be back right now, despite Giratina being popular, which you would think that Arceus struggles against Giratina. Now, we do have Makani Trans, Regigigas Arc Pile deck here, which he did do well with, and a lot of the people on the kitchen also did pretty good with in Portland's Day 2. So definitely a deck that is to be respected. I think that this is maybe the best way to play Arc Pile right now. The Regigigas does open up a lot of doors for Arceus. The Judge is really good. Obviously, your Tina matchup might be a little shaky. You do have the Mew. Even Gigas can be good against Tina if after they do start Requiem. But the matchup can still be a little shaky. But I am a big fan of Arc Piles, and I would love to see the Gigas deck do well. I wouldn't be surprised if, a few players played the Gigas deck and got Day 2 with it. It seems like a pretty good deck. It can be a little bit bricky sometimes. I mean, we saw on stream Makani and Joe both did brick, but I am still a fan of this deck. I wouldn't be surprised if a couple people did get Day 2 with it. Champo's also kind of on the bubble right now. It did have a decent run in Portland. You know, did get, what, I think top 32 in Portland. It doesn't seem like a terrible deck at all. Champo does seem to be in an okay spot still. Its Tina matchup might be a little shaky, though. That might be the only thing holding it back. But we are seeing Champo convert back to the OG cross-switcher Cologne build, which might be the best way to play it, especially with Gardevoir being on the rise right now. It doesn't seem bad for Champo. Guardy's also starting to cut Avery out of the deck, which is another big deal for Champo. That was one of Champo's biggest issues, is your Guardy matchup was not great because they had Avery and Screamtail, which is extremely annoying for Champo. But Champo does seem to still be in an okay spot heading into Charlotte. Doesn't seem like it gets any worse or better, other than maybe having a shaky Giratina matchup, and your Miraidon matchup's always been a little tricky too, but I still think that Champo's not in a bad spot. Wouldn't be surprised if, you know, a few named Champo players had some kind of top 32 run once again with the deck. Now, Roaring Moon is very much on the rise right now. I think Roaring Moon's actually in a spot where I think it's going to see a little bit more play in Charlotte than before, mainly because I think a lot of people are really on the idea of Roaring Moon, and I think Roaring Moon is honestly not in the worst spot. It does seem to have a bit of an awkward Guardy matchup, but I think that its Tina matchup's good. We did see it take down Tina on stream, and I think it's a big deal. I think Moon's Tina matchup being solid is a very big deal. Moon does seem to be in an okay spot right now heading into Charlotte, I'm not going to lie. Now, what is the best way to play Roaring Moon is going to be the question. Is it going to be playing Roaring Moon with this like super turbo build, or is it going to be the Ross Coughlin build, which we'll look at in a sec later on in the video, because Ross Coughlin also had a good day 2 run in Portland with his Roaring Moon build, but his build was a bit different than what we've been seeing. Moon does seem to be on the rise right now, though, and I'm not going to lie, don't be surprised if maybe you see a Roaring Moon get like a top 16 placement. I could see Roaring Moon go as high as a top 16 run in Charlotte. It could be time for the Moon. Cloth, the most random deck in the format that just seems to do well. Cloth, I think, has a bad Giratina matchup, and if I'm going to play Cloth this weekend, I would be like, well, I'm just like hoping I don't hit any Tina, because I don't know if Cloth actually beats Giratina. I think that matchup is unfavored for Cloth. But Cloth is still a funny deck. I mean, you have a good Miraidon matchup. Your Zard matchup should be pretty decent. You just kind of have fine matchups. Your bad matchups are going to be stuff like Gardevoir, which is very scary. And with Gardevoir potentially being a good play for this tournament, that does scare me a little bit. But yeah, Cloth doesn't seem like a terrible deck for Charlotte still. I mean, we're going to see a couple in day 2 guaranteed. I mean, there's all those Cloth believers out there. They're going to play the deck. They're going to get day 2. Unfortunately, I don't know if we'll see Cloth getting higher than like maybe a top 64. It doesn't seem like it can break that mold, but maybe this time around it's the time for Cloth. Goldango, everyone's favorite deck right now. Goldango is on the rise still, too, like Roaring Moon. It's getting those placements. It finally got some day 2 placements in Portland after not getting any day 2 placements at all in any of our regionals so far this format, but now Goldango has gone day 2s. The Palkia build, I think, is still the strongest way to play it. The Palkia provides a lot of power to the deck. Goldango might be a decent play. Now, apart from, again, a shaky-ish Tina matchup, or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the deck actually beats Tina. I don't know. Goldango seems to still be an okay deck. I think that I'm hoping. I mean, I really hope somebody's going to get day 2 with it. I mean, the hopes and dreams is to see Goldango get like top 8. I don't know if that's going to happen, but if somebody can have a good enough run with Goldango at Charlotte, please get top 8. It would be amazing. Seeing Goldango in top 8 would be sick. I don't know if that's possible, but Goldango's a cool deck, and I'm always happy to see it get day 2. And it might happen again. I think we'll still see Goldango get day 2. I think a lot of people right now are picking their favorite decks to play to Charlotte. Biggest regional of all time. Seeing a Goldango get day 2, it's not going to be uncommon. Anti-Valiant's starting to slip a little bit in popularity, but I think the deck is still like an okay play. You might have a bad Tina matchup, in my opinion. I think your Tina matchup might be a little shaky, but I think you're still like an okay, like all-around okay deck. Like, you're nothing too special. I don't think you're doing anything too crazy. You're not hitting the highest of highs. You don't have like the greatest matchup spread, but the deck is still fine. It can still cheese some donks out of nowhere. I think Anti-Valiant's still like in an okay spot right now, in my opinion, and seeing it, get day 2 is probably going to be, it'll happen. We'll most likely see a couple Anti-Valiants in day 2. I don't know if we'll see it do any higher than like maybe a top 32, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a couple Anti-Valiants in day 2 in Charlotte for sure. Palkia is also still a deck that I think a lot of people have forgotten about. Its hype has kind of died off a little bit, especially now that like Goldango's starting to come back. But I do think that Palkia is still in an okay spot. The Palkia Ice Rider deck, in my opinion, is still a decently strong deck, and I think still has room for improvement. I think playing something to counter Charizard, like maybe playing Team Devo or the Articuno in the deck, could be a big deal. I think we're going to see a Palkia in day 2 in Charlotte. I don't know how good the deck will do again. It's hard to predict how Palkia is going to do, to be honest. But I could see Palkia maybe getting like a top 32, maybe a top 64, somewhere in that range. Wouldn't surprise me if you saw Palkia do somewhere like that in Charlotte. But yeah, Palkia is decent. I think that the deck's still kind of slept on right now. Still seems like an okay deck. I think your Tina matchup could be okay too. I don't think it has a bad Tina matchup at all. in my opinion. Speaking of Tina, Arc Tina, the little Arc deck that could. Now, is this the best way to play Arc over Gigas? I could see it. I could see Arc Tina being a bit better this for Charlotte, mainly because your Giratina V-Star matchup is a slightly better matchup than the Regigigas matchup, mainly because you have Giratina too, so you can respond to their Giratinas with your Giratina, which is good. Arc Tina still just a very straightforward, respectable, strong deck. I think your Zard matchup's not bad either if you were to play, the superior V-Star in the deck or any other grass attacker. Could still be a decent play. I definitely think there will be at least one, maybe two, Giratina V-Star Arc Pile decks in Day 2 of Charlotte. Arc Superior did do decent in Portland too. Now this is mainly just like a deck that just wants to beat on Charizard. I don't think this deck has the best matchup spread overall. It does have obviously a great Charizard matchup. Having the slacking in the deck might help a little bit against like Miraidon and stuff, but I don't know. We'll see if Arc Superior can run it back. I think Superior is not a bad grass type right now in our format. Seems to be the best way to play Arc with a grass attacker right now, to be honest. And, I mean, the problem is, with Charizard not being as popular as it used to be now after these last couple regionals, I don't know if a deck like this can do as well, but who knows? Maybe it can. Lugia. Lugia's in a weird spot, too. It's definitely, like, fallen off a lot, and I don't know if Lugia's the best deck right now. It does seem to have, like, an awkward Miraidon matchup, and then, obviously, you're going to have more awkward matchups, too, but I don't hate Lugia. Like, I'm going to be honest with you. I've tested Lugia. I mean, I even streamed Single Strike Lugia. I actually don't think Lugia's in a terrible spot, to be honest with you. In fact, with Giratina being popular, it doesn't seem like a bad time to actually play Lugia. Like, if there were any time where anybody was ever going to play Lugia, I don't know, man. Right now, it doesn't seem like a terrible time. Lugia does seem to be like it could be in an okay spot right now. I'm not even memeing with that. Lugia doesn't seem terrible right now. I ain't gonna lie, man. As crazy as that might sound, Lugia actually doesn't seem terrible right now. But Lugia's okay. Again, it's just mainly relying on Charizard slipping a little bit in popularity. Because I think that's all ultimately Lugia's worst matchup is Charizard. Your Charizard matchup, in my opinion, with Lugia, it's pretty abysmal. I don't think it's the greatest matchup on the planet, but yeah, I think that Lugia's not terrible. With Giratina's popularity, it's not a bad deck. I mean, Lugia's a deck that can beat Tina. I think Single Strike Lugia is also very underrated still. Still a fan of that deck. I don't know if we'll see a Lugia Single Strike in Day 2. Fingers crossed we do. I really like the deck. I think it's a cool deck right now. Yeah. Now, we got Ross Cawthon's Roaring Moon deck. Now, this was the other way to play Roaring Moon that I want to talk about. So, Ross Cawthon played a very interesting build here with some interesting cards. He had a couple, Ancient Booster Capsules, Emergency Jellies, playing Pokestops, all in on the stops, no Water Energy. The big thing is he's playing a lot more draw supporters in the deck. He's playing 3 Research and 2 Ionos and only 2 copies of Sada. Most Moonless play like 4 Sada. Go all in, hit those Sadas. Ross decided to play a little bit less on that side. Now, the engine is still fine. You still have Dark Patch to build up Moon, but you also have Moltres Energy Switch for Roaring Moon, which allows you to easily build up Roaring Moon every single turn without having to rely as heavily on Sada, because you can also use Moltres with Energy Switch, and that engine does make sense too. I actually really like Ross's list here. I kind of want to try it out and test it a little bit, but again, I'm thinking that Roaring Moon is on the rise right now, and I could see a Roaring Moon have a decent run in Charlotte. And will it be the more straightforward turbo build with the 4 Sadas, with the Waters, or will it be the Ross Cawthon build where it has a little bit more draw within the deck? Now, I still like Urshifu Valiant. I mean, these Iron Valiant pile decks are pretty funny right now, but I still like this deck. I think Urshifu Valiant's still not a bad deck. Your Tina matchup, honestly, might not be bad. I think if somebody were to practice this deck a lot, know the matchups, know how to play the deck and all that stuff, and you're good with math and you know how to kind of navigate each situation, I still think that the Urshifu Valiant deck is still decently strong. Fingers crossed gets Day 2. You never know. It might. Now, there is the Arc Tina Venusaur Vmax deck from Portland. I'm a fan of this deck. I mean, playing Arc with Giratina and some kind of like grass type attacker seems to be okay. And Venusaur seems like a cool attacker. It hits really hard against Charizard. It's got a lot of HP. The thing with Superior is that Superior sometimes can't knock out more than one Charizard. Because if you have to use Arceus to knock out one Pokemon to build up your Superior, you've taken 1 prize. Superior then kills a Charizard, you've taken 2 prizes, or 3 prizes, and then Charizard does 270 one-shots your Superior, and that's it. There's your Superior, there's your run. You can't kill another Charizard. Venusaur, at the very least, as long as they don't gust it first, should be able to take out 2 Charizard EXs before it gets knocked out, which is kind of why I think a lot of people are looking at this Venusaur Arctina build. But I like it. I mean, hopefully we see these Arctina builds do well, and this is one I did want to also point out briefly. There's also the Greedent Palkia pile that did well in Portland. Pretty cool deck. I mean, it'd be cool to see if somebody played a deck like this again to Charlotte and had an okay run with it. Seems like it's a cool deck, man. Greedy at VMAX, it ain't bad. I mean, hey, there's a lot of comfies in the format. Why not hit him with the max gimme? But I don't know, these like Iron Valiant pile decks are really cool, and this is another one I wanted to talk about. Now, before we end up the video, I want to talk about my wild card prediction, my one deck that I would love to see get day 2 or even get a decent run, like a top 32 run in Charlotte, and that is going to be good old Zorobox. I got this list here from an online tourney that I think I went like 7-1 or something, 8-1 in online tourney with over 100 players, and I'm a big fan of Zorobox. I want to see Zorobox succeed. I love this deck. It's a really fun deck to play. One of my favorite decks in the format. And yeah, I want Zorobox to do well. And can it do well? I think it can. I think Zorobox is a deck that seems to be okay. Your Giratina matchup is beatable. You do have access to Manaphy Jirachi, which does wonders in that matchup, especially if you're attacking them with Scizor and Cleaver and stuff. And if you're just playing very smart in the Tina matchup, it is beatable. Your Zard matchup should be good. You have both Scoville and Jolteon, which are very good in that matchup. Yeah, your matchups are good in my opinion. I think that the Zorobox deck is a really fun deck, and I really want to see Zorobox do well in Charlotte. That's my wild card. Zorobox is rotating. Somebody's got to play it. Someone's got to get day 2 with it. Please make it happen. But there you go, folks. That is it for my Charlotte predictions. If I have to predict what might win the tournament, my best odds would maybe be on something like Gardevoir. I think Gardevoir has, the potential chance to take down the tournament. Maybe even something like Mew could win the tournament too, maybe. If there's a lot of Giratina, somebody could have a hot run with Mew and do well and maybe win the tournament. But yeah, Guardian Mew are like my 2 decks that I have predicted to win. Charizard could run it back to Giratina too. Honestly, with how the meta is right now, with everything being all over the place, there really is a lot of room for, anything to do well. But I think something like Gardevoir and Mew are my 2 safe picks for what could win Charlotte. But you never know. I mean, last year Charlotte was won by Eternatus Vmax, and that was a bit of a rogue deck at the time. So that's, yeah, you never know. Charlotte is known for rogue decks to do well. Maybe this is time for Roaring Moon or Goldango to win a regional. That'd be pretty sick. But yeah, there you have, folks. Those are my predictions for Charlotte. Let me know what you think of them down below. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you on another video here on the second channel. Bye-bye.